Hey guys, tonight we're not gliding down any aisle strewn with petals. You're not holding a bouquet or practicing your vows. No, tonight you're waiting in line with dozens of other women, your dress starched, your eyes lowered, and your future entirely out of your hands. You're not auditioning for a play or a promotion. You're being judged for marriage, not a marriage you chose, one that chose you, or might, if your posture holds, and your skin glows under candlelight, and your family's papers check out, because this isn't a fairy tale, it's a bride show, and you probably won't survive this, socially, politically, or even literally, if you misstep in front of the wrong king. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, while you're at it, comment your location and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing with your hands clasped tight, feeling the weight of too many eyes. Velvet brushes your calves, and somewhere to your right, a girl is silently crying. The room smells like rose water and nerves. You've been instructed not to speak unless spoken to, not to break line, not to slouch, not to look too eager, but certainly not indifferent. It's a lot to juggle while your feet cramp in embroidered slippers. This is the reception hall of a palace, or maybe just a provincial governor's estate, but it feels like a coliseum, except instead of lions, there are dowager duchesses with sharp tongues, and instead of cheering, there's whispering. Everyone here has their own agenda, and none of them involve you as a person. You're a potential match, a vessel for lineage, a future claim to land, a walking alliance. Bride shows weren't invented by fairy godmothers. They were tools of statecraft, particularly in Byzantine and Russian courts. Imagine the draft pick of an imperial dynasty, except the scouts are monks, the prizes are uteruses, and the stakes are centuries of succession. If that sounds bleak, that's because it kind of was. Still, these weren't crude cattle markets. They were polished, rehearsed, and layered in opulence. You were expected to shine, but within strict boundaries. Too beautiful? Suspicious? Too plain? Disqualified? Too outspoken? Dangerous? Too silent? Probably hiding something. And make no mistake, these displays were never just about beauty. Historians still argue whether bride shows were even real in some cases, or simply elaborate retellings of informal selection rituals. But what we do know is this: girls, often noble-born, sometimes merchant class, were brought in, evaluated, and either dismissed quietly or elevated dramatically. You might have heard that Theodora, the wife of Justinian, rose from humble beginnings. That's not quite accurate. The version where she was picked from a pool of dancers is mostly poetic flourish, but the spirit of that myth lingered for centuries. Men in power liked the idea of choosing their queen like a man browsing silk at market, and women learned quickly that appearance could be a path to agency if navigated carefully. You shift your weight, your dress is stiff at the shoulders, and the candlelight makes everyone's skin look dewy. That's intentional. One of the ladies in waiting subtly reapplied oil to your cheekbones earlier. She didn't ask, just swiped and moved on. Behind the great draped curtain, someone coughs. You hear footsteps, soft, deliberate, heavy with decision. The selector, whether prince, czar, or bureaucrat, is coming. There's a joke among the older girls. If you faint during your audience, you'll be remembered. If you throw up, you'll be removed. So, you memorize the perfect middle ground, demure but breathing, radiant but not radiant enough to threaten. It's tempting to romanticize this moment, but the truth is, bride shows weren't about finding love. They were about presenting an acceptable illusion of it. A ruler needed a wife who could produce heirs, secure foreign alliances, charm the court, and not get assassinated in year 3. That's a tough resume. Sometimes, if your father had connections, you'd get a subtle hint beforehand. Stand 2 paces forward when your name is called, he might say, or smile when the steward nods. Other times, you were a last-minute inclusion, there to fill out the numbers, to make the favorite look better by comparison. But occasionally, rarely, someone like you got chosen, not because of wealth, not because of birth, but because of something else. Maybe the way you bowed just so, or the way your hands didn't tremble, or because the selector liked your silence. You'd think the other girls would hate you. Sometimes they do, but often they're relieved. One less competitor, one less set of lungs hyperventilating in the bridal wing. As the curtain pulls back and a tall, robed figure enters the chamber, you inhale and hold it. Your heart is a drum in your ears. Welcome to your first beauty contest. The stakes, everything. The sandals don't make a sound. That's the first thing you notice. The man who enters, tall, straight-backed, layered in silks finer than you've ever seen, moves like water, and yet the room shifts around him, like orbiting planets adjusting to gravity. His gaze doesn't sweep so much as slice down the row, pausing here and there. Your spine straightens without you telling it to. You know better than to meet his eyes. That would be bold. You're not bold. This is Constantinople. You're in the heart of the Byzantine Empire, which means you're also at the center of a bureaucracy so complex, it could probably run the moon. This bride show isn't some impromptu affair. It's state-managed, protocol-driven, and conducted with a level of solemnity most modern governments would envy. The year, somewhere in the 8th or 9th century, the emperor, or his representative, has summoned eligible maidens from across the empire. Noble families pack their daughters into carriages like offerings, dressed them in their best pearls, and whispered strict warnings all the way to the palace gates. Don't speak out of turn. Don't smile too broadly. Don't, for heaven's sake, correct anyone. You remember these warnings as clearly as your own name. Your name, of course, is probably listed on a scroll somewhere, along with your age, your family's status, your mother's fertility record, your dowry estimate, and the relative curvature of your nose. Historians still debate just how official those records were, but you know the truth. Someone definitely checked your teeth. The bride show, called ekloge in Greek, isn't a myth. At least, not entirely. Scholars used to dismiss it as court gossip, but more recent studies have found traces of protocol for these selections. There were real mechanisms at play: selection committees, ceremonial unveilings, background checks dressed up in incense and hymn. Even monks were involved because apparently holiness helps in ranking facial symmetry. You're not the first to stand here. Empress Theodote, for example, was chosen in a bride show, her selection scandalous enough that monks rioted. She had beauty, yes, but also charm, tact, and possibly the ear of the emperor before the event ever began. The show was the performance. The choice, perhaps, had already been made. Your turn comes faster than expected. A hand gestures you forward. You walk. measured, deliberate, like your bones are made of balance and your breath is a prayer. Your dress rustles just right. That took practice. The figure before you, it might be the emperor himself, or just a favored eunuch acting on his behalf, says nothing. He just looks. You hold still, willing your cheeks not to flush, your lips not to tremble. There is nothing to say. He nods. That's it. You're dismissed with the faintest flick of a hand. Not chosen, not rejected. Just return to the line. Your fate postponed. Later that night, the girls whisper across the dormitory. One swears she saw a small smile when the emperor paused at your section. Another claims the opposite. Another says he's not even picking for himself. He's picking for a nephew. The room buzzes with theories, and you sit still, your hands folded in your lap. The truth is, the bride show is a game of layers. Surface beauty matters, but so does loyalty, fertility rumors, astrological omens, and family alliances. You could be the most beautiful girl in the room and still lose because your uncle backed the wrong general 5 years ago. You could be plain and win because your dowry includes 3 vineyards and a coastal fort. And sometimes, the whole thing is theater. The emperor already has someone in mind. The show just softens the blow to the others, makes it all look fair. Still, you hope. That's what they don't say out loud, but it hums through the marble halls like a prayer. Maybe it's me. One fringe detail sticks in your mind, something your aunt said once, in a tone too casual to be accidental, that sometimes a girl chosen in a bride show could wield enormous influence, not because she married well, but because she learned the language of power early. She became the quiet architect of diplomacy. She never ruled, but she whispered to those who did. You lie in your narrow bed, staring at the carved ceiling. Tomorrow, another set of girls arrives. Some of you will be sent home. Some will remain for further observation. And one, just one, might wake up to find her name embroidered in silk and sung at court. And if it's not you, then you go home, remembered not as a failure, but as a girl who once stood at the heart of empire, under a ceiling of stars and judgment. You close your eyes, but not all the way. You are cold. That's the first thing you register. Not the awe of the palace, not the layers of your gown, but the chill that settles into your bones from standing so long. Your fingers are stiff. You wonder if czars notice things like that. Probably not. This isn't Constantinople anymore. This is Russia, somewhere near Moscow, or maybe a little farther. You're not sure. The journey here was long and muddy, and you tried not to let your slippers get ruined as you climbed down from the cart. But you're here now, standing in the domed hall of a boyar's estate, under the flickering light of an icon lamp. You are one of hundreds. Bride shows in Russia, smotriny, they call them, were less opulent than their Byzantine cousins, but no less consequential. You weren't summoned to dance or charm or even speak much. You were here to be looked at, to be judged, and if you passed the initial rounds, maybe 3, maybe 5, then you might be called to court, and that's when it would get serious. The Tsar, after all, doesn't pick lightly. Ivan the Terrible did it. So did Mikhail Romanov. Whole processions of girls, lined up in rooms, or sometimes introduced one by one in increasingly tense rounds, until one name was called, and a dozen others went home in silence. One historian compared the process to a chess tournament, but that doesn't quite capture the dread. You try not to breathe too heavily. The girl beside you has already fainted once today. That's not a good sign. She's from a powerful family, but rumors are swirling. Something about a distant cousin's rebellion, or a questionable horoscope. Her hair is flawless, though you'd braided it for her yourself. Fingers fumbling with jealousy and sympathy. They call names slowly. Each one sounds like a sentence. Some girls vanish down hallways with velvet curtains. Others don't return. It's unclear which fate is better. Then, finally, they call your name. Your heart does something strange, both leaping and sinking. You step forward. The room shifts. The Tsar is not here. Of course, you don't get to meet him. Not yet. You meet his advisors, his doctors, a priest who looks older than God, and a noblewoman who examines your hands for calluses. You are given a glass of water and watched carefully. This is not hospitality. This is a fertility test. That's the oddest part, really. The way your body becomes public domain. You're poked, prodded, whispered about. Your posture, your skin, your menstrual history, all examined. One girl, years ago, passed the initial rounds and was sent to Moscow, only to be rejected because she once had a nosebleed that frightened a courtier. She never married after that. Her name, some say, was cursed. Historians still argue whether these bride shows were truly about love, or if they were just a convenient excuse to shuffle noble families like cards in a deck. But one fringe detail stands out. Sometimes, the bride's father was evaluated just as closely. His loyalty, his land, his debts. You weren't just a daughter. You were an extension of political math. You're ushered into a smaller room, warmer and dimmer. There are carpets on the floor and a tray of tea you're not sure you're supposed to drink. A woman sits across from you. She's dressed simply, but with a firmness that suggests status. She doesn't smile. She asks you questions, not about your reading, or your sewing, or your love of church. She asks about your temper, your patience, whether you like animals, whether you've ever had a vision or dream that came true. You blink. That wasn't on the list. The Russians were big on omens. It's said that when Tsar Alexis chose Maria Miloslavskaya, he was following a dream sent by the Virgin Mary. Maybe. Or maybe her family simply had good connections. Either way, the story stuck. You answer the woman's questions calmly. She notes something in a book. You have no idea whether that's good or bad. Later, you return to the common hall. Some girls are missing. Some are packing. One is sobbing into a fur-lined cloak. No one speaks above a whisper. That night, a servant quietly slips you a pair of wool stockings. No explanation, just a look. You take it to mean you're staying. For now, you try to sleep, but the room is full of muffled breath and tension. Tomorrow, they say, the Tsar's brother might come, or his physician, or maybe the Tsar himself. No one is sure. Everything here is rumors and robes. But one thing is certain. If you are chosen, you will never go home again. And if you are not, you might wish you were. The thing about beauty, you're learning, is that it isn't really about you. It's about what you represent. Your eyes might remind someone of their mother, your voice of a forgotten song, your posture of a noble bloodline thought extinct, or maybe your cheekbones match a coin minted 2 reigns ago. You never know. But someone, somewhere, is always watching and weighing and calculating, because you aren't just a girl. Your potential. You wake early, because everyone does. No one tells you to. But the tension in the dormitory makes sleep thin and nervous. You adjust your braids in the icy mirror and wonder how much your nose shape matters today. You're not in a court now, not in a palace. You're in a provincial stronghold where whispers of power meet the machinery of marriage. The groom, a second son of a powerful duke. His family tree is knotted with alliances, claims, and cousins married off like tokens on a game board. Beauty here isn't about attraction, it's a political algorithm. You sit straight-backed while a steward evaluates your profile. He doesn't care if you're kind or clever. He's checking the distance between your pupils, the curve of your fingers, the width of your hips, 1 inch too narrow, and you're dismissed. Not rudely, just gently folded out of history. The steward murmurs to an attendant. You pretend not to notice. It's unsettling how quiet it all is. The process should feel like flirtation, like a grand romantic gesture. But instead, it's more like an auction conducted in silence, where the currency is lineage and your dowry is a footnote. You try not to think about it too hard. Some girls start to lean into it, practicing the perfect smile in corners, adding drops of crushed berries to their lips. Others grow quiet, curling into themselves like paper held too close to the fire. And then there's you, sitting at the edge of the room, trying to remember which eye you're supposed to blink with first when you bow. One of the noble mothers passes by, eyes sweeping like a frost. She pauses near you, then moves on. You feel both dismissed and oddly proud. Here's the thing they don't say. These shows aren't really about the girls. They're about their blood. Marriage is dynastic continuity dressed up in brocade. It's the merging of two houses through womb and signature. Love? That's optional. Children? That's mandatory, especially male ones. And yes, sometimes you get lucky. Sometimes the man you marry is kind. Sometimes he's even handsome. But usually, he's old, gout-ridden, or suspiciously fond of card games and mistress houses. That's the reality. You're the royal equivalent of a treaty. Historians still debate whether bride shows were genuinely about appearance, or if beauty was just shorthand for acceptable to the court. There's one letter, written by a Polish nobleman in the 16th century, that describes his sister's rejection as a triumph because she avoided being bound to a mad cousin with 3 debts and 2 swords. She lived out her life in a manor surrounded by cats. The family framed it as a blessing. Your own family, however, expects more. You were trained for this. You read psalms in Latin. You practiced embroidery with silver thread. You were even told how to bow so that the light hit your forehead just right. This is your job. One quirky tradition from the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. Brides were sometimes tested on their knowledge of household management. Not love, not poetry, not politics. But how many bushels of grain it took to feed 30 men for 2 weeks. You knew that. You studied it. And still, you're not sure if it helped. You're called to step forward. Again. This time, into a room where 2 men sit behind a table and 1 woman watches from a side bench. There's parchment, ink, a ledger. You sit. You smile. You're asked questions. Do you sing? Yes. In what languages? Church Slavonic and French. Do you ride? Yes. Side saddle and bear. Have you ever been sick during springtime? No. Only once in winter. From bad oysters. The woman scribbles something. This is what it feels like to audition for a role you'll never fully inhabit. Queen, consort, mother of the next inheritance clause. When you're finally dismissed, the hallway feels longer, colder. You sit again on the bench, waiting. Because that's what this all is, a waiting game, but not idle, strategic, like chess, but with your body on the board. You glance around and the chamber, at the other girls. Some lean into the game with fire, others go silent. You? You breathe deep, smooth your skirt. You don't have to be the prettiest, just the most memorable. The room smells like cloves, and parchment, and something faintly metallic, coin polish, maybe. You're seated on a cushion that's too stiff to be comfortable, and your dress is tighter than it was yesterday. That's on purpose. One of the ladies helping prepare the girls whispered that a cinched waist suggests discipline, not health, not comfort, just discipline. You're in Poland now, or Lithuania. The borders are a little fluid in this century, and you're never quite sure which crown claims authority over this particular fortress. But what is clear is that you're part of something big, something dynastic, because this bride selection isn't just about one marriage. It's about weaving noble bloodlines into a fabric so dense that no peasant uprising could ever rip it apart. And you, of course, are thread. The nobles here talk strategy more openly than in Russia or Byzantium. It's less candlelit mystery, more courtroom logic. Your face is examined, yes, but so is your family's legal standing, your uncle's treaties, your cousin's rumored involvement in that duel last Lent. There's a book on the table. You can't see what's written in it, but you know it contains your lineage, your grandmother's fertility, your great-grandfather's rebellion, your father's debt, all of it. It's not just about your dowry anymore. It's about the shape of your blood. Historians still argue whether Polish bride selections were codified or more informal. But there's a fascinating footnote in several chronicles. Young women were sometimes evaluated with literal scorecards. Not official ones, of course, but nobles, during tournaments and festivals, would quietly jot down notes on appearance, manner, dress, like a spreadsheet, but on parchment. One of the judges here, he's a starosta, or some other title that means man with opinions, asks you to turn slightly. He examines your profile as if you're a sculpture. You try not to flinch. He nods. Not at you. At the clerk behind him. A flick of the hand, a scratch of ink. You're either one step closer to marriage, or one step closer to being someone's diplomatic afterthought. You want to ask, did I pass? But you don't. You sit, still and silent, while others go in. One girl returns with her jaw clenched so tightly she can't speak. Another walks back smiling. Too much, you think. That never goes well. A third doesn't return at all. At supper, the food is better than you expected. Stew with barley and garlic. Some stewed cherries. A chunk of coarse bread. You eat quietly, surrounded by girls who are equal parts rivals and allies. No one talks strategy, not openly, but every glance, every silence, every raised brow is a paragraph. You find yourself watching the doors now. Every time they open, your stomach flips, because you've heard a rumor the final selection might take place tomorrow, not by committee, but by the family themselves. The groom, a boy you've never met, is supposedly handsome, or dull, or terribly pale. Depends who you ask. The only consistent thing people say is, he's desperate to marry well, which makes you a candidate, or bait. You sleep poorly, dream of corridors that loop back into each other, of judges with blank faces and ink-stained hands. The next morning, you're woken by bells, not church bells, something smaller, private. A handmaid tells you to dress in the lighter gown, the one with the indigo sleeves. You obey. The hall you enter isn't grand. It's wooden, slightly drafty, but seated at the far end are two women in veils, a balding man with rings on every finger, and, finally, him, the groom. He looks nervous. This isn't like the other rounds. You're introduced by name. He nods. The women whisper behind their fans. You're asked to sit. There are no questions. Just long, awkward silence. He looks at your hands, then your face, then, mercifully, at the table. It's hard to explain how dehumanizing this all is without making it sound cruel, but it's not cruelty. It's procedure. You're being selected like parchment for a treaty, smooth, even, and with just enough flourish at the edges to make the alliance seem stylish. There's a pause. He says your name. Once. You look up. I like her voice, he says. You blink. Not your eyes, or your smile, or your clever weaving, but your voice. He's not even heard you speak. The woman next to him nods, once, solemnly, and just like that, the moment passes. You're dismissed, but slower this time, almost, gently. No one tells you what happens next. Not directly, but the handmaid who helps you back to your room doesn't take your gown to be laundered. She hangs it carefully, smoothing the fabric. You catch the look in her eyes, half pity, half approval. Later, someone brings you honeyed wine. You're not chosen, not yet, but you're not forgotten either. And in this world, that's almost the same thing. The mirrors are everywhere, tall ones, framed in gold leaf, little ones, tucked into painted folding screens, one absurdly large one with a crack running through the corner that no one seems to fix. You catch your reflection at least 30 times before breakfast. And each time, you straighten your shoulders, because someone might be watching through the mirror. In this place, that doesn't feel metaphorical. You're in France now, somewhere in the Loire, maybe, or near Paris. Honestly, the location doesn't matter as much as the company, because this is court, and court means games. You're part of a bride show that doesn't call itself a bride show. It calls itself a salon. That sounds elegant, right? You've been invited to showcase your graces at a gathering hosted by a duchess who definitely knows your name but pretends not to. You're escorted in, seated among other girls, some titled, some mysterious, and given a glass of something sparkling, not too much, of course. Tipsy girls get remembered, but not in the good way. You're told the young duke who might be looking for a wife will be in attendance, or maybe his father is, or maybe the king's cousin is helping vet potential brides for his niece's marriage. The reason shifts, but the objective is constant. Be seen, not seen, exactly, not noticed for being loud or colorful, seen the way a rare book is seen, carefully, and then desired. You're here to suggest potential, beauty that can blend in, elegance that can expand a family line. Historians still argue whether these salon-based informal bride shows in France were actually orchestrated by royal families or simply encouraged by social gravity. Either way, the effect was the same. Certain girls, always with the right balance of charm, pedigree, and posture, were selected for advancement, quietly, through dance cards and glances, and a single murmured phrase like, "She has promise." A woman with powdered hair leans in as you sip your drink. "Your sleeves," she says, "are just slightly last year." You smile politely. "That's because they are." She raises an eyebrow, then nods. "You've just passed a test. This is the French court, and here, wit matters almost as much as waistlines. One clever comment can buy you more favor than a dozen dimples. But it's a delicate game. Be too clever, and you're dangerous. Be too dull, and you disappear. A girl at the far end of the room begins to play the harp. Everyone turns slightly, but no one really listens. The music is atmosphere. So are you. You've memorized the steps. The slight turn of the wrist when you lift your fan. The 3-pace bow. The difference between a laugh that invites and a laugh that insults. It's exhausting, but it works. One of the men across the room, powdered, perfumed, leaning against a fireplace like he owns the marble, tilts his head toward you, just slightly. You pretend not to notice. That's part of the dance, too. Let them think they discovered you. Later, during the card games, you're paired with him. A deliberate move. The hostess arranges these things like a general positions troops. You smile when he misplays a card. He compliments your excellent memory. You ask him about his horse. You don't care about the horse, but he likes that you asked. One curious detail from the time: brides were often evaluated not just on behavior in salons, but also in how they handled polite cruelty. You might be insulted, mildly, publicly, to see if you could recover with grace. You were expected to demonstrate charm under pressure, not too different from modern job interviews, except your future might include being Duchess of a province you've never heard of. There's a girl near the window, red-cheeked and quiet, who hasn't spoken much all evening. You've noticed the way her sleeves are carefully mended, the way she avoids looking at the men. You know what she's doing. It's a gamble. If she's lucky, someone will find her mysterious. If not, she'll vanish into wallpaper. You wonder how you look to her. Eventually, the evening ends. Girls drift into corridors, escorted by handmaids and chaperones. You're told you may receive an invitation to another salon, smaller, more private. That's code for someone's interested. You nod. In your room that night, you remove your earrings slowly, your ears still warm from candlelight and whispers. You think of how many times your value was assessed tonight, how many times you smiled, how many ways a single misstep could have ended the game, but you survived. And here, survival is success. In the next salon, the mirrors will be even taller. The wind smells like grass and sweat and horsehair. It whips past your face as you hold your veil down with one hand, gripping the saddle horn with the other. You're on the move, not through a marble palace or velvet curtained salon, but across the endless open steppe. This is the Mongol court, and the bride show here is nothing like the ones you've experienced before. For one thing, no one's trying to make you faint with tight corsets or delicate slippers. Here, you're expected to ride, to hunt, even. And that's not decorative. It's part of the test. The Khan's sons don't want wilting flowers. They want wives who can endure windburn, wield a bow if needed, and survive a migration without crying about ruined embroidery. You're not being judged from across a drawing room. You're being watched as you ride beside other girls through rough terrain, your cloak snapping behind you like a banner. Still, this is no meritocracy. The daughter of a powerful tribal leader is more likely to be chosen, just like anywhere else. But appearance plays a role too. Symmetry is admired, grace is respected, and endurance? Endurance might be the most romantic quality of all. Historians still argue whether Mongol bride selection events were formalized or more embedded in seasonal gatherings and court festivals. Some believe there were official choosing ceremonies with ritual vetting, Others point to the more casual, but no less significant process of observing potential brides over time, how they acted, moved, worked, laughed. The show, in this context, might be stretched over weeks. You're housed in a large felt jur with 5 other girls, all from different clans. One girl speaks little but shoots like a legend. Another sings to herself while brushing her horse. The air is warm inside, thick with mutton and wood smoke. And unlike the silences of European courts, here the older women talk openly. They laugh. They squint at you and say things like, "She's got good hips," or "Her teeth are straight, good for the line." You pretend not to mind. You actually do mind, but you're learning to breathe through it. You're given tasks, boiling milk, braiding rope, watching over goats. Yes, goats. If you can't manage livestock, you're unlikely to manage a household or a legacy. One afternoon, you're invited, no, summoned, to the Khan's camp. Not the Khan himself, one of his sons or nephews. The details shift. You ride in, your hair braided, your sash tied correctly, your knife tucked discreetly in your boot. That was your aunt's suggestion. They like girls who don't look helpless. The prince, if he is a prince, nods at you. He's seated on a cushion under a canopy, drinking fermented mare's milk. His gaze is steady, not lecherous. He gestures for you to join him. You sit, not too close, not too far. You fold your hands. You do not smile. Not yet. He asks about your journey. You answer. He asks if you've hunted. You tell him about the fox you didn't catch. He laughs, not mockingly, just amused. Later, you learn that this was the real test, not the bow, not the goats, not the embroidered sash you spent hours stitching, just this, your ability to hold a conversation without shrinking. There's a quirky bit of folklore here. A bride who spills her drink during her audience is said to bring either great fertility or terrible luck. You didn't spill, but your cup trembled. You wonder which omen that implies. That night, you return to your tent. One of the girls is missing. No one speaks of it. Her belongings are gone. The others braid each other's hair in silence. You look up at the canvas ceiling and listen to the horses outside snort and shuffle. You think about how many cultures consider the bride show a public act. But here, out on the steppe, it feels strangely intimate, like the sky itself is watching. You aren't chosen yet, but you're not invisible. And in the Mongol world, that's the beginning of power. You're surrounded by stone walls now, damp ones, the kind that leak chill into your bones no matter how many layers you wear. But this isn't a dungeon, it's a hunting lodge, and despite the smoke curling up from the hearth and the hum of conversation echoing through timbered halls, the real game isn't deer or boar, it's marriage. You're in England, and this is the most English version of a bride show you can imagine. Formal, indirect, and cloaked in plausible deniability. No one says this is a beauty contest. That would be gauche. Instead, you've been invited to a festive retreat with eligible ladies and notable gentlemen. The implication is silent, but deafening. You arrive with 2 trunks, 1 chaperone, and a stomach full of tea and anxiety. The other girls have curls tight as rosebuds and smiles like practiced poems. You give one a polite nod. She doesn't nod back. The men here aren't kings. Not exactly. But they're close. Dukes, earls, and one very brooding marquis who hasn't smiled once since you arrived. One of them is your likely match. That's what your aunt said as she tightened your bodice back in London. Don't waste this, darling. You're not the prettiest, but you're clever. Use that. The days are structured. Breakfast in the great hall, walks through the gardens, hawk handling lessons, as if that will come in handy when raising heirs, and each evening, a dinner, candles, boar, lute music, and careful conversation. The game is exhausting. You're evaluated constantly, but never overtly. You must laugh at the right jokes, nod thoughtfully at the right poems, and look impressed, but not intimidated, when the gentleman beside you casually mentions that his family estate includes 4 manors and a herd of sheep, so prized they were once blessed by a bishop. Historians still debate whether these gatherings were orchestrated bride shows in disguise or merely social opportunities for noble matchmaking. But one letter from the late 1500s mentions a most advantageous gathering where the women were observed as if hawks from the rafters, which tells you everything you need to know. You're handed a bow and arrow one afternoon. It's symbolic. You're not expected to hit anything, just to look graceful doing it. You knock the arrow, exhale slowly, and shoot. You miss, but you look good missing. Later, one of the footmen tells you quietly, almost like gossip, that one of the dukes asked your name, not to your face, of course, through a steward. That's the English way. You sit with him at dinner the next night. He offers you pheasant. You offer him a joke about boars and bad poetry. He chuckles. You've just won a round. These contests are subtle. No sashes. No numbered cards. Just the slow accumulation of favor. Your laugh in the right ear, your elbow brushing the right sleeve, a smile held 1 second longer than is proper, and yet you never quite know the rules. One girl, a Lady Margaret something, was sure she had the Marquis's attention. Then, without warning, she was called back to London. Her carriage was already packed. No explanation, just a quiet, efficient dismissal. The other girls pretended not to notice, but they did. A quirky English superstition floats among the housemaids. If your candle flickers during supper, someone has chosen you in their heart. Yours flickered twice. You try not to read into it. At the final hunt, you're paired with him again. The not quite a prince with the serious jaw and the good boots. He offers you his hand as you dismount. You take it. Your gloves are warm. His are colder. He doesn't say much. Just, you rode well. You don't respond right away. Then, thank you. He smiles. That's new. That evening, there's a subtle change in your room. A different floral arrangement, a new pitcher of wine, a letter, blank, unsigned, but tied with green silk, the color of his house crest. It's not a proposal, not yet, but in this quiet English system, it might as well be. You lie down beneath the heavy canopy, surrounded by silence and the scent of old stone and dried lavender. If tomorrow comes with an offer, you'll accept. That's why you're here. Not for love, not for lace, but for legacy. And in England, legacies are best negotiated over pheasant, poetry, and long walks where no one actually says what they mean. The fan is essential, not for cooling, it's winter, and not for modesty. You're already swaddled in layers of brocade, but for signaling, because in this Spanish court, your fan is your voice, closed with a snap. You're uninterested, tapped once against your cheek. You're thinking, dropped. You've just made a mistake. You're in Madrid, and the bride show, though no one dares call it that, is well underway. It takes place in drawing rooms, cloisters, gardens, and confessionals. You're not just here to be looked at, you're here to be interviewed. Unlike the more theatrical displays in other kingdoms, the Spanish process favors scrutiny over spectacle. Think job interview, not fashion parade. You're asked about piety, about loyalty, about whether your family has any remote connection to the Moors. A trick question, there's no right answer. You've already had 2 chats with a lady in waiting who may or may not be secretly writing a report on you. And this afternoon, you're summoned to a formal reception where, rumor has it, the Infanta's cousin will be in attendance. That's the real prize. And yes, his mother will be there too, armed with rosary beads, a razor-sharp gaze, and a memory that spans at least 4 generations of your lineage. You adjust your mantilla and practice your court Spanish. This is not the time to slip into Catalan. You enter the marble hall. It's cool and echoing, with heavy oil paintings staring down from the walls. You're offered a small cushion for kneeling. You hesitate, just long enough to imply grace without arrogance, then kneel. The cousin doesn't speak at first. He looks you over, not lewdly, just thoroughly. His mother whispers something in Latin. You catch the word temperamentum. Temperament. They're assessing not your appearance, but your composure. One fringe detail about these Spanish bride evaluations. Girls were often placed under observation for weeks before any decision was made. You could be visited by priests, by family confessors, even by court physicians pretending to check your pulse while really checking your temperamentum. The cousin finally speaks. You ride? You nod. Yes, my lord. Side saddle? Both. He nods once. You're not sure if that was the correct answer. A small dog appears from under a chair and paws at your dress. You smile and pet it without looking away from the prince. That, it turns out, was the actual test. You passed. His mother blinks slowly. That's the closest you'll get to approval. Afterwards, in the cloister garden, one of the other girls leans toward you. She likes you, she whispers. She hates dogs. You're too tired to laugh. That night, at Vespers, you kneel with the rest of the candidates. The chapel glows with candlelight. You pray, or at least try to, but your thoughts spiral, endless variations of what they might be thinking about you, your lineage, your posture, your chin. Historians still argue whether bride selections in the Spanish Habsburg court were dictated more by the crown or the church. The answer is probably both, which means you're being judged not just as a noblewoman, but as a moral instrument of state. Any whiff of scandal, even secondhand, could sink you. You remember what the steward said earlier, if you sneeze at dinner, apologize to the Virgin. It was a joke. Probably. Tomorrow, the short list will be drawn. You don't know how many names will be on it. Some say 3, others say 5. You try not to hope, but of course you do. You return to your quarters. The maid who brushes your hair tells you that another girl left suddenly. Her trunk was removed after midnight. No explanation. You both know what it means, but neither of you says it. Instead, you ask softly, "Did she cry?" "No," the maid replies. She laughed. You lie back on the stiff bed, eyes tracing the ceiling beams. You've made it through another day. You were tested and not dismissed. You held your posture. You avoided coughing during Mass. You laughed at the right moment. You did not cry. In Spain, that might be love. There are no windows in the room where you wait, just latticed screens, carved with patterns so intricate they look like frozen lace. Light filters through in golden threads, and the scent of rose oil clings to everything, your skin, your sleeves, and the silk cushions beneath you you've been sitting here for hours, maybe days. Time moves differently in the harem. You're in the Ottoman Empire now, and this bride show isn't called a show at all. It's called selection. But make no mistake, every step, every glance, every embroidered hem is being watched. You're not vying for a crown, not exactly. You're hoping to become a consort, maybe a favorite, maybe more. If the Sultan notices you, if you're lucky, if you survive. This isn't a contest for a ring. It's a system, highly organized, carefully layered. You were chosen as a child, trained by women who know how the world works, schooled in music, calligraphy, poetry, religion, and politics. You know how to walk without a sound, how to bow with just enough deference to show humility, but not submission. You were prepared for this, and yet you are not prepared. The imperial harem is not a prison, despite what Western tales like to claim. It's a world unto itself, a labyrinth of power, ambition, alliances, and influence. And within this veiled world, the selection of a new consort is no frivolous affair. It is a state decision, disguised in silks and song. The Sultan's mother, the Valid Sultan, plays a role. So do eunuchs, tutors, old favorites. Your name is whispered behind curtains, measured in tone and weight. And though you've never spoken directly to the Sultan, you've memorized the timbre of his footsteps. Historians still argue whether harem selections were purely aesthetic, or if the system prioritized intelligence, loyalty, and adaptability. Most agree it was a combination. After all, the future mother of a sultan couldn't be chosen for cheekbones alone. You recall one curious custom. When a girl was summoned to the imperial chamber, she was escorted by the Kislar Aga, the chief black eunuch. A signal, a transition. After that night, everything changed. You haven't been summoned, but today, you were moved to a different room, closer to the central pavilion. That might mean something, or it might mean nothing. The other girls say little. One is weaving her hair with golden thread. Another naps with her face turned toward the lattice light. They've all learned the same lesson. Quiet can be armor. You think back to your first weeks here, how you were overwhelmed by the colors, the silks, the overwhelming scent of musk and jasmine. You remember crying once in the bathhouse. A handmaid told you gently, "Tears waste water." You never cried again. Now, as you sit, you adjust your shawl and prepare yourself mentally. If tonight is the night you're called, you must remember everything. The right words, the right silences, the rhythm of your breath. You don't hope for love. That's not the game. You hope for placement, favor, the chance to rise, because within this world, some women have wielded extraordinary power, more than viziers, more than generals. Hurrem Sultan, once just another concubine, became one of the most influential women in Ottoman history. Not by chance, by calculation. You hear footsteps, not the Sultan's, softer, the Kislar Aga. He pauses, not at your door. 2 doors down, a whisper, the flutter of silk, then silence again. Someone else has been chosen tonight. You smooth your hands across your lap. You do not sigh. A fringe fact. Girls who weren't chosen weren't discarded. They could rise to senior positions within the harem, marry powerful administrators, or even mentor future candidates. The harem wasn't a cul-de-sac. It was a corridor. And your next door might open soon. The candle burns low beside you. Your shadow dances behind the lattice. You're not a girl anymore. You're a contender, and somewhere behind a curtain, your name is still being whispered. The paper doors slide shut with a whisper, not a slam, not a click, just a soft shush, like the air itself is bowing out of the way. You kneel on a tatami mat, back straight, hands folded in your lap, eyes lowered, your sleeves trail like waves on either side of you. Stillness is everything. You are in Japan. And this is not a bride show. Not exactly. Not openly. It is a presentation, a viewing, a ceremony in which a potential bride is observed not for beauty in the Western sense, but for harmony, poise, control. You're one of several candidates brought to Kyoto to be considered for marriage into a powerful family, perhaps samurai, perhaps aristocratic, perhaps even Kyuj. Court nobles descended from imperial blood. The family's crest hangs on a scroll in the alcove behind you, framed by a delicate arrangement of pine and plum blossoms. Your job, right now, is to not ruin the view. A middle-aged woman, his aunt, maybe, pours tea for you with hands that move like water. You wait exactly 3 heartbeats, then lift the cup, gracefully, silently. The tea is bitter and hot, and that is the point. Here, everything is the point. How you sit, how you breathe, how you wear your furosode kimono without letting the collar shift too far left. You practiced that in a mirror for hours last night. Unlike the raucous court salons of Europe or the whisper-thick harems of the East, this selection feels quiet, sacred, and utterly impenetrable. There is no crowd, no laughing rivals, just this room, this tea, and the click of a koto string being tuned somewhere behind a rice screen. Historians still argue whether formalized bride viewings like this were widespread in medieval Japan, or if they were the invention of later romanticized tales. But evidence from court diaries and monogatari, narrative literature, suggests that noble families often held these viewings in private homes, with prospective brides demonstrating refined talents under intense observation. You've already done your calligraphy scroll, a poem in waka form, about the turning of seasons and the uncertainty of the heart. You practiced the ink flow, the brush pressure, your sleeves barely moved. The older woman had nodded, just once. You don't know if that was approval. One of the more curious customs here is that music often matters more than speech. Earlier this morning, you played the koto. You only made one mistake. A single note. Flat. Quick. You hoped they didn't hear it, but they did. You're offered a second cup of tea. This time, it's cooler, sweeter. The woman beside you smiles gently. You take it. He enters only after the second cup. You keep your eyes lowered. You've never seen him before. His robe is deep indigo, embroidered with cranes. His footsteps are silent. He says nothing, just kneels across from you. You hear the rustle of silk, the shift of breath. You keep your spine perfectly straight. You wait. This is the test. He watches you for a long time. Not creepily, just present, a stillness that feels like it might shatter the world. Then, your poem was sad. You nod. So is winter. A pause. Then a breath. Almost a laugh. Almost. He stands and leaves. That's it. No approval. No rejection. Just an ending as quiet as the beginning. You're guided out. Your slippers placed neatly at the threshold. You bow once. Deeply. You do not look back. That evening, in the guest quarters, you are served a special dish. Grilled river fish. With yuzu. The other girls are not. No one says why. A soft clink of the porcelain, and you understand. You are not dismissed. You were remembered. That is everything. Because in Japan, the bride, who's remembered without speaking too loudly, without moving too quickly, without needing to be told, is the bride who will be called again. The bells ring deep and slow, echoing through the drafty halls like a sermon you're not allowed to interrupt. You stand in line, hem just brushing the cold stone floor, hands folded and gloved, because ladies of this court are not supposed to expose their knuckles. Calluses, you see, are for peasants. You're in a German duchy now, somewhere near the Rhine, though no one seems to agree on where the duchy ends and someone else's begins. But what's perfectly clear is this: you're here for a selection, not a ball, not a gathering, a formal, theological, medically supervised, reputation-obsessed evaluation for marriage. This bride show is more structured than any you've experienced so far. Everything is written down. Everything is ranked. You've even heard there's a clergy-led committee keeping tally. The Duchess overseeing the process is known for two things: devotion and decisiveness. You will be weighed against a rubric she helped design. Today's test? Theology. You're ushered into a long wooden chamber lined with bookcases and saints' portraits. A monk asks you 3 questions about the epistles. A tutor from Heidelberg wants you to recite a verse in Latin. And a physician, not a priest, asks if your menstrual cycle aligns with the moon. You smile faintly and answer each question. You've studied. You didn't come here to be pretty. You came to be appropriate. Historians still debate the role of religious orthodoxy in early modern German bride shows. Some accounts claim piety was more important than beauty, especially in Protestant territories. Others suggest that theology was simply a way to weed out unfit alliances, those who might raise eyebrows in church pews or provoke a bishop into sermonizing. You're asked to demonstrate your embroidery next, not on a hoop, on cloth for liturgical use, gold thread, Marian motifs. You knew this was coming and brought your best sampler. When the Duchess herself inspects it later, her nose doesn't wrinkle. That's probably a win. A curious detail about this particular court: the bride's confessor must write a moral evaluation before marriage is permitted. Not just sins confessed, but attitudes. One girl was once rejected for showing excessive cheerfulness. You've practiced appearing moderate in all emotions. You nod politely. You smile demurely. You never laugh first. The nobleman in question, your potential groom, is not present. Yet. But his steward has watched you all day, making notes. He's a tall man with a cloak that seems to billow even when there's no wind. He hasn't spoken a word to you, but you're sure he's heard everything you've said. You return to the main hall. Candles are being lit. Girls talk quietly, comparing notes. One swears she saw the Duchess smile. Another says she caught the steward frowning. You listen. You never add to the conversation. Too much talk can be a liability. Later, you're brought a new gown to try on. Stiffer, darker, with more brocade than you'd choose yourself. You wear it anyway. When you're escorted to the evening chapel, you walk precisely 3 steps behind the steward, never touching the wall, hands gloved, chin down. You sit through the Vespers service in aching stillness. Your knees hurt. Your back burns. But when the organ sounds and the congregation rises, your motion is fluid, graceful, practiced. A fringe fact flickers into your memory. In some regions of the Holy Roman Empire, noble families kept bride books, bound volumes recording the qualities, dowries, and lineage of eligible women. These books were circulated among courts. You wonder if you're in one. You wonder who read your page. After the service, The Duchess nods at you. Just once. You curtsy. You leave. That night, the steward himself brings you a tray of food. He doesn't speak, but you notice the wine is red. Reserved only for those under serious consideration. You eat slowly, the fire crackling beside you, your gown too tight around the ribs. You do not let yourself hope, but still, something in you flickers, like the candles in that long wooden hall. The hall smells of pine resin and wool. A fire crackles at the far end, throwing shadows against the carved wooden walls. You stand by a long table, clutching a goblet of spiced mead you're too nervous to sip. The air outside is snow-thick and sharp. Inside, it's no warmer than a barn, but the stakes are far higher. You're in Scandinavia, maybe Norway, maybe Sweden, maybe somewhere so remote that borders are still argued over by men in cloaks with wet boots. Wherever this is, you've been summoned to participate in an old tradition, a bride viewing, where you'll be assessed not just by the man who might marry you, but by his entire clan. You were told it's a feast. It is not a feast. It's a jury trial with reindeer sausage. You stand with the other girls near the hearth. Your gown is linen, dyed with crushed berries, and a fur-lined shawl keeps your shoulders from trembling too obviously. Around you, elders squint. They don't lean in or whisper or take notes. They just watch. And they remember. One of them is his grandmother. Her fingers are gnarled with years and frostbite. She's not looking at your dress. She's looking at your posture, your shoes, your expression when you're offered the wrong seat. You correct nothing. You take the wrong seat and smile anyway. Good. Bride viewings here are older than Christianity. In fact, they sit awkwardly beside it. There's a priest in attendance tonight, but he mostly mutters over his bread. The real authority is the family matriarch, who hasn't spoken since you arrived, but who blinked, slowly, when you greeted her in the local dialect. Historians still argue whether these Scandinavian bride selections were formal events or just folded into winter gatherings where politics met matchmaking. What's clear is that reputation matters. Your father's, your mother's, and, in some cases, your grandmother's reputation in 1342. One girl left early. She doesn't churn, someone said. That was enough. You were ready for this. You can milk, mend, knead, and pour ale without spilling. You know the sagas, not just the heroic ones, but the domestic tales, the ones where women outwit priests and outlive husbands. You tell one at dinner, carefully, to the table at large. The grandmother smiles into her bread. That's more than approval. That's invitation. There's no sash to wear, no ribbon pinned to your bodice. You're not announced. But when the main course is served, you're seated closer to the fire. When the young man whose fate is entangled with yours offers you another scoop of meat stew, it's with a hand that doesn't tremble. He doesn't smile, but he looks directly at you. Later, in a quiet moment when the room hums with music and ale and full stomachs, he speaks. You're quieter than they said. You meet his gaze. They talk too much. He nods. That might be your engagement ceremony. One fringe tradition in these northern courts, a symbolic test of endurance. A walk, barefoot, through snow to the nearest outbuilding, to retrieve something trivial, a cup, a ribbon, a sprig of evergreen. It proves you're hardy, capable, cold-resistant. You're told to do it just before dawn. The snow crunches underfoot like breaking bones. You don't flinch. You return with the ribbon. You don't hand it to him. You place it on the table. He picks it up. Nothing else is said. You'll likely be wed in spring, under a pine bough, with snow melt trickling down stone gutters and a goat bleeding somewhere in the background. You'll be part of the clan now. A house, a hearth, maybe sons with flaxen hair and stubborn hearts. You walk to your cot that night with frost-bitten toes and a fire in your chest. You weren't chosen for softness. You were chosen for strength. And somewhere beyond the fjords, the ancestors approve. The silk is loud, not the sound, but the color, a red so rich it seems to hum. Gold thread spirals along the hem, like fire licking at the edge of a scroll. You are draped in it, layered in it, defined by it. When you step out into the courtyard, every eye turns, not because of who you are, but because of what you look like. You are in India now, Rajasthan, specifically. The arid air clings to the walls of the palace, thick with incense and dust, and the heat curls your breath before it ever leaves your throat. You're here for a bride viewing, not that anyone calls it that aloud. This is a presentation of alliances, a gathering of noble families under the guise of celebration. But every embroidered veil in the room knows exactly why they're here. The Rajput lords are watching. So are their mothers. So are their wives, seated behind latticed windows, whispering judgments through fans and folded silks. And you, standing in this bright courtyard, forehead jeweled, posture flawless, are being evaluated not just for beauty, but for bravery. Because here, queens ride into battle, or, at the very least, die with swords in hand. The Rajput ideal isn't a wilting flower, it's the flame of a lamp that burns even when the wind howls. Historians still debate the degree to which these bride presentations were voluntary. Were they public parades or subtle selections? Were the girls coached or coerced? But one detail is constant. Your family's reputation walks into the room 2 steps ahead of you, and yours is complicated. Your uncle once quarreled with the Maharana's steward. Your dowry includes land, but contested land. You were trained in singing and swordplay. That makes you interesting, maybe threatening. This viewing involves 3 parts: a formal procession, a poetry recitation, and the offering of pan, a betel leaf folded in a specific way with specific fillings, symbolizing everything from fertility to grace. You practice the fold. You have 3 extra leaves in your sleeve, just in case. When your name is called, you step forward, anklets chime. You bow deeply, just short of subservience. You place the pan onto the silver tray with perfect precision. The elder watching nods. Just once. You don't exhale yet. After the formalities, you're brought into a shaded pavilion for conversation. Not with the suitor, yet, but with his aunt, his sister, and a cousin who seems to speak only in proverbs. They ask you questions about embroidery, about discipline, about honor. You are careful. But when the cousin says, "Would you ride into battle beside your husband?" you reply, "He would ride beside me." A pause, then laughter, not cruel, pleased. The aunt leans forward, smiling. "Good," she says. "You will need a sharp tongue in that household." Later, you glimpse him, from a distance. His turban is wrapped in 7 folds, a symbol of his status. He's tall, silent. His eyes flicker toward you once, nothing else. A quirky fact you once heard. In some Rajput courts, a bride was tested by how she bore jewelry. Too much? Greedy? Too little? Insulting? The ideal? Just enough to show you understand legacy, not indulgence. You chose 3 bangles. 2 gold, 1 glass. That choice, apparently, was right. That night, the other girls sleep in shared chambers. cooled by stone floors and perfumed drapes. You're moved elsewhere. A private room? A silver pitcher? A bowl of almonds and dried dates? A length of silk that wasn't there before? You don't ask questions. You are not promised anything. No announcement is made, but the handmaiden bows lower when she enters. The guards at your door stand closer. Someone, somewhere, made a decision. Maybe it was him. Maybe it was the aunt. Maybe it was your pan folding. You sleep lightly. The drumbeat of the desert beyond the walls matches the rhythm in your chest. You were seen. You were tested. You were not found lacking. And here, where queens sometimes burn on their husband's pyre, and sometimes command armies from balconies, that means everything. The drums are slower here, deeper, less celebratory, more ceremonial. You stand in a line with 5 other girls, dressed in layered cloth dyed with indigo and ochre, cowrie shells sewn into your hair. The sun is high and sharp, but you do not flinch. Your mother told you long ago, in this place, pride is posture. You are in West Africa, in a royal court, maybe in the kingdom of Dahomey, or the Ashanti Empire, or even among the Yoruba city-states, where political unions are sealed not just through battles or treaties, but through choosing, and today, a new queen, or consort, or co-wife, or senior lady of the court is to be selected. It is not called a beauty contest. It is a rite, a ritual, a reading of the body and the spirit. You've been preparing for months, not just in dress, but in presence. The elder women taught you how to move, how to walk without a sound, how to carry a calabash on your head without spilling a single drop, how to speak in proverbs, how to greet with reverence, but never subservience, because here, queens are leaders, partners, strategists, and sometimes warriors. Historians often reduce these traditions to exotic court rituals, but you know better. This isn't decoration. It's a system, a deeply rooted one that balances lineage, wisdom, fertility, and strength. It's said that the king does not choose alone. The ancestors watch, the spirits lean in, and the council of women, they whisper to him more than anyone else. Today, you kneel before a carved stool in the royal compound. The Queen Mother sits behind it. She does not look at you directly. Instead, she holds a gourd in one hand, tilts it, lets the water spill slowly onto the earth. Watching the trail, watching how it moves toward your feet. It's a divination. She says nothing. You're then given an offering bowl, dried kola nut, millet, and a folded cloth. You carry it on your head, walk the length of the courtyard, and return. Simple, right? Except every step is a question. Do you balance with ease? Do you pause when the drum beats change? Do you hesitate at the threshold? You don't. Later, you're brought into a shaded tent where 3 senior women ask you questions. One wants to know your family's clan. Another asks about your first moonblood. The third leans in close and says softly, "If the king is wrong, do you tell him so?" You answer, "Only if it's the kind of wrong that breaks the village." She nods. That's the right kind. A curious tradition in the kingdom of Dahomey. The Mino, or Dahomey Amazons, were an elite corps of women warriors. Some began as wives of the king. Others were chosen for martial skill. Beauty mattered, yes, but only when paired with fire. You don't know if you'll be asked to fight, but you know how to hold a blade, just in case. As the sun dips, the selection begins. Not a parade, not a rose ceremony, a circle. The girls are called one by one to dance, Not wildly, but with precision, grace, command. Your name is called third. You step into the circle. You move like the breeze across the savannah. You do not smile. You let the rhythm guide your hips. You hold your head high. The Queen Mother does not blink. Later, when the drumming stops, a young boy brings you a cloth bundle. Inside, a necklace, cowrie shells, copper, a symbol of favor. It is not a crown, but it might be. You are not the only one given such a token. 2 others are called forward. All 3 of you kneel again, and the Queen Mother speaks. A woman is not chosen because she is beautiful, she says. She is chosen because she can carry weight without breaking. You do not break. That night, the fires glow low. You sit with the other chosen ones, your eyes reflecting the light, your body tired but proud. No one tells you what happens tomorrow, but your seat is closer to the center now. And when a young girl passes by and lowers her eyes to you, you realize you're no longer in the line, you are the standard. You arrive quietly, no trumpets, no processions, no ceremonial welcome with trays of fruit and embroidered slippers, just a dusty road, a creaking cart, and a steward who looks only half certain that you were expected at all. You hand him your letter. He squints, nods, waves, vaguely toward the manor house. You're in a minor duchy now, small, rural, perhaps even forgotten. The type of place where maps disagree on the borders and titles are passed down with more sentiment than strategy. But even here, tucked among moss-covered hills and crumbling stone estates, bride shows still happen, if you know where to look. This one isn't formal, it isn't grand, it's barely acknowledged. But, you know the signs. A sudden flurry of young women arriving with trunks and governesses, a manor recently cleaned, a festival hastily arranged, and a duke's son, unmarried, unspectacular, and suddenly interested in music evenings. You settle into your chamber. The bed creaks. The walls are thin. There's a crack in the window glass that lets in a persistent breeze. You're not sure if this is a marriage market or just an excuse for the family to feel important again. Maybe both. The other girls are quiet, wary, and dressed in hand-me-down lace. There's no gossip here, just glances. You meet one girl's eyes at supper. She looks away. The young man himself appears late. He's thin, pale, and polite to the point of invisibility. When you're introduced, he says, "Ah, yes," as if recognizing a name from a shopping list. You curtsy. He offers his hand. It's cold. You're not sure why you're here, and yet you stay. Because this kind of bride show, the quiet provincial one, is still a gate. Maybe not to power, but to escape, to a home, a name, a life outside the line of spinster aunts and forgotten sisters. You wouldn't be queen here, but you'd be something, a duchess, a mother, a woman, with her own key to a door. The next day, there's a walk through the orchard. You're paired with him, by coincidence or by orchestration. He talks about pears, you talk about frost. He listens. It's more than you expected. A curious footnote. Some small noble houses held informal bride retreats with no official competition. Just a quiet observing of the girls in domestic settings. How they sewed. How they kept time. Whether they smiled at servants. At tea, you help the cook carry a tray. That's noted. At the embroidery circle, you untangle another girl's thread. That's noted. At supper, you compliment the old baroness's dulcimer playing, which is awful. That's definitely noted. By the end of the week, You're invited to stay longer. No one else is. You don't ask why, but the others notice. One girl, a blonde with perfect posture, leaves in the rain. No goodbye. Just the rumble of a coach wheel and a damp servant wiping mud from the doorstep. You're moved to a larger room, fresh linens, a new pitcher. The wind no longer creeps through the window pane. He joins you in the music room one evening. No steward, no mother, just the two of you and a harpsichord out of tune. He plays badly. You laugh, just once. It echoes. Later, he says, you don't talk as much as the others. You smile. Neither do you. He nods. It's the closest you'll get to a compliment. A few nights later, you find a small note under your teacup. You may stay as long as you wish. It's unsigned, but you recognize the handwriting. There is no coronation, no contract read aloud, but the staff begins calling you Miss in a different tone. You're seated beside his mother at dinner. The steward starts bringing your favorite bread without asking. One girl at the stable gives you a sideways smile. They say you're chosen. You say nothing, because this bride show, if that's even what it was, didn't end in applause or procession. It ended in quiet acceptance. And here, in this soft, unremarkable corner of the world, that's everything. She says no, just like that. No grand speech, no trembling lip, no glance back. She's called forward, curtsies neatly, listens to the offer, the family name, the lands, the future, and then she simply says, no, thank you. The room freezes. The steward's pen hangs above the paper. The nobleman's mouth opens slightly, unsure whether to argue or be offended. The older women blink, as if trying to clear their vision, because no one ever says no. You're standing nearby when it happens. Part of the final group, the short list. You've made it past the dinners, the dances, the awkward courtship rituals veiled as parlor games. But now the entire process is suspended in the air, because one girl just tilted the entire table. She turns and walks away, her shoes clicking gently on the flagstones. Her shoulders do not slump. She does not cry. She disappears through the doorway like a breeze, leaving silence in her wake. You should feel triumphant, one less rival. But what you feel instead is a strange pulse behind your ribs. Not fear, not admiration, possibility. Historians rarely record this moment, the refusal, when a bride show turns into something else, when a girl, given the golden opportunity of alliance, title, or escape, walks away from it entirely. Was it bravery? Foolishness? Historians still argue whether these refusals were acts of principle or simply the only power left in a powerless situation. You hear whispers later. She was promised elsewhere. No, her father lost his title. I heard she joined a convent. I heard she married a merchant instead. The truth doesn't matter. The impact does. That night, the suitor chooses no one. The bride show ends without an engagement. The manor clears out in a quiet fog of packed trunks and half-hearted farewells. You watch as girls are loaded into carriages like parcels with half-fulfilled futures. You're offered a choice, not by a prince, not in a crowd, but in a library. One of the aunts, the kind who's been watching everything without saying much, finds you reading a botanical folio. She sits beside you, folding her hands. She said no, the woman says, without preamble. And now the boy's pride is wounded. It may be months before he tries again. You nod slowly. I could write to my cousin in Bruges, the aunt adds. She runs a hospital. They need women who can read and listen. No dowry required. You blink. It's not a test. I don't need an answer tonight, she says, and stands. But you don't have to stay and wait for another round. Another round. Another display. Another month of smiling and wondering if your posture is queenly enough. You return to your room. There's no portrait of her, the girl who said no, but you can still feel her absence, like a stone removed from a circle. She changed the shape of the moment, of the system. You lie down. You stare at the ceiling beams. For the first time in weeks, your stomach doesn't ache with decisions, because sometimes the bravest girl in the bride show isn't the one who gets chosen, it's the one who walks away. You're alone now, not abandoned, just alone. The carriages are gone, the halls have quieted, and the embroidered cushions on the receiving benches are a little faded from use. The last bride show, if you can still call it that, ended days ago, and the echoes are finally starting to fade, but you're still here, not chosen, not dismissed, just remaining. You walk the corridors without being guided now. You know which tapestries conceal side doors and which floorboards creak. The staff nods when they see you, not with reverence, not with urgency, just familiarity. Like a chair, no one moves, but no one forgets. You begin to wonder whether that's your legacy, the one who stayed behind, the one who didn't win the contest, but didn't lose it either. You start to see the bride shows differently now, not as grand events, but as systems, machines, rituals polished to shine but designed to sort. You were sorted. You saw others sorted, and now you're standing on the far side of it, looking back. You remember the girl in Russia who fainted when the czar's physician asked her to drink a glass of milk, the one in France who smiled too much, the one in Japan who bowed too deeply, the one in Spain who whispered a prayer instead of answering a question. You remember all of them, because each moment felt tiny, but together they formed a pattern. Historians love to debate the structure of bride shows, how formal they were, who made the final call, what the girls were really evaluated for. But they often miss what you now understand. It wasn't about beauty. Not really. It was about usefulness. Every system needed wives, mothers, consorts, political leverage, heirs, silk to wrap around a throne. But too much ambition? Dismissed. Too much softness? Dismissed. Too real? Dismissed. The girls who succeeded were the ones who could play the part without becoming the part. Mirrors who could reflect what the court needed to see. One curious document you once glimpsed in a noble library, buried between hunting records and grain accounts, listed brides like furniture. Suitable, polite, teeth good, no melancholy. That was the entire entry. You find yourself returning to the great hall where it all began. Not because you expect something, just to see it again. Empty. It looks smaller, less powerful. A stage without an audience. The steward finds you there. He doesn't say much. Just, there'll be no new selection until winter. You nod. I expect you'll be gone before then. You smile. Softly. I expect so, too. But you don't leave right away. You help in small ways, replacing candles, translating letters, organizing ledgers. You learn more in a week of quiet service than in a month of smiling at suitors. You learn which alliances fell apart, which marriages were political wins but personal disasters, which girls never made it home. And then one evening, at the edge of the orchard, a younger girl, barely 13, is brought in by her family. She's nervous, thin, wearing borrowed shoes. You smile at her. You remember how that felt. You realize what's happening. You've become part of the system, but you don't hate it. Not entirely, because from inside, maybe you can bend a few corners, smooth a few edges, make the next one just a little easier for the girl who stands where you once stood. So when the steward asks if you'll help organize the next season's presentation letters, you say yes. Not because you want to run the show, but because someone should be there who remembers what it felt like. Someone who knows the weight of a nod, the silence of a rejection, the strength it takes to walk forward, even when you're just one name on a long list. The bride show is over, for now, but the girl who survived it, she's just beginning. It's not a ballroom this time. It's a studio. Fluorescent lighting hums overhead, and a pageant coach taps a pencil rhythmically against a clipboard. You sit in a plastic chair with 50 other girls, each of you dressed like a bright, glittering version of yourself. Somewhere nearby, a mic check echoes off the walls. Testing Miss New Jersey, please report to the wings. Welcome to the Miss World rehearsal. You're far from the stone halls and candlelit corridors of earlier centuries. But something about this room feels familiar. The posture, the polish, the unspoken tension of being assessed by people who might, with one gesture, define your future. The bride show never really ended. It just swapped parchment for application forms. You're wearing heels that ache, a smile that feels sculpted, and a gown chosen specifically for how it moves under stage lights. You've practiced your walk pivot pose 1,000 times. You've mastered the art of answering complicated questions in 30 seconds while looking approachable. You've been trained, just like the girls centuries before you, in what to say, when to blink, and how to laugh politely. And make no mistake, this is a competition. For sponsorships, for visibility, for a crown that might open doors you can't even name yet. Historians still debate whether modern beauty pageants are direct descendants of medieval bride shows, or just distant cousins. But the parallels stack up fast. Choreographed presentation, public judgment, scrutiny wrapped in silk, and the constant, quiet tension between personal identity and performative appeal. You glance to your left. One girl is doing breathing exercises. Another is touching up her lipstick with trembling fingers. A third whispers her platform speech under her breath. I believe in education for girls and access to clean water. You believe in those things too. But here, belief has to fit into a soundbite. There's a quirky, often overlooked bit of pageant trivia. In the early 20th century, some contests included categories like most likely to make a good wife. That label may be gone, but the undertone lingers. You're still expected to be beautiful, poised, articulate, humble, but never too assertive. Still expected to represent something, a nation, a value, a brand. When you finally walk on stage, the lights are so bright you can't see the judges, but you feel them, watching, measuring. Your answer to the question about female leadership comes out smooth. You mention strength and compassion. You mention your grandmother. You mention hope. The crowd claps. You curtsy. Yes, curtsy. And exit stage right. Backstage, the other girls offer hugs and smiles. Some real, some rehearsed. Later, when the results are announced, your name is called third. You don't win. You also don't disappear. You're approached by a sponsor, a journalist, a charity representative. You're offered a different kind of crown, one made of speaking engagements and scholarship opportunities. Not diamonds, but influence. And you begin to understand bride shows used to be about marriage. Now, they're about representation, same structure, new branding. You scroll your social media feed that night, your image, laughing, graceful, teeth perfect, is already online, liked, shared, filtered. The caption reads, "A modern queen." You close the app, you look in the mirror, not a gold-framed antique, just a hotel mirror with smudges around the edge. But your reflection is the same one that stood in line in Constantinople, rode across the steppe in furs, folded pan leaves in Rajasthan. It's still you. The costumes changed. The stage is different, but the gaze is eternal. The mirror is quiet, not just in sound, but in attitude. No lighting rig, no makeup chair, just you, seated in a small room, brushing your hair in the soft light of an early morning window. Your sash is folded on the chair behind you. Your shoes are off. The cameras are gone. The judges have gone home. For the first time in months, maybe years, you're not on display. You're not competing anymore, but the thoughts still run through your head. Shoulders back, chin lifted, smile soft, not too wide. It's muscle memory now. You could do it in your sleep. Maybe you have. You rise and stretch, toes sinking into the carpet. The view outside shows a city just waking up. Cars hum, people jog, street vendors start setting up, and somewhere, on a screen or a stage or a ballot or a throne, another girl is being chosen. The bride show is not ancient history. It just went digital. It's in the filters, the casting calls, the college applications with headshots. It's in the way you practice sounding natural, the way you tailor your ambitions to fit polite expectations. It's in the way women are still asked to smile while being judged, and still judged when they don't. You remember the girl who walked away, the one who said no. You remember the one who folded the pan leaf, the one who balanced the calabash, the one who whispered her poetry into the silence of Kyoto, the one who sat through theology questions with her spine burning, the one who danced in the courtyard while the Queen Mother poured water toward her feet. You remember them all, because they weren't just contestants. They were witnesses, quiet witnesses to systems older than maps, and smarter than kings. Systems that tested everything from charm to courage, from stillness to speed. Historians debate the term bride show. Some say it's too theatrical, others say it's too clinical. But you've lived it, in every variation. You've watched how the costumes changed, but the stage directions stayed the same. One fringe theory says the bride show never really existed, that it was a myth, a literary device, a convenient narrative. You smile. That theory is wrong. You are the proof. And so is every girl who ever stood in a room, waited for a name to be called, and decided, consciously or not, to play the part or flip the script. You fold the sash. You place it in the drawer. You close the mirror. And you walk out into the day, not chosen, but choosing. The morning light softens. The dust in the air turns golden, swirling slowly like the last thoughts before sleep. You imagine the hall's empty now. The voice is quiet. The candles melted into still pools of wax. No more footsteps behind you. No more judgment waiting around the corner. Just silence and breath. The bride shows are over. They've left their marks in stories, in records, in inherited ways of sitting and smiling and speaking. But you've made it past them. You've stepped off the stage. You've shrugged off the gowns and veils and braided symbolism. You've returned to yourself, not to who you were before, but to someone wiser, someone who knows the weight of expectation and the strange clarity that comes after. You lie down. The pillow is cool against your cheek. The world, for once, is not asking anything from you. Not your name, not your profile, not your plans for children, or your embroidered credentials. Just your rest. In the soft dark, you think of the others, those you stood beside, competed with, envied, admired. You hope they're resting too. You hope they made it out. The bride shows may return again, in new forms, new pressures, new places, but now, you know what they are. You can name them when they come, and sometimes, naming is enough. So breathe, sink into the quiet. You were never just a face. You were the memory that survived the mirror, and now you can rest. End of script. Sweet dreams.